So now let's get back to the present, or, well, to a quote from the recent past. Former Prime Minister Paul Keating once famously said, "When you change the government, you change the country." I always thought that was a pretty pretentious thing for a politician to say, but I'm not sure. I think it might be quite true in regards to Victoria. Do you think Victoria is a different state under Dan Andrews, and does he have something like a cult following?
Look, I think there's a strange thing going on in Victoria, Fred. I guess the best way to describe it is that for the first time yesterday, I saw a Dan Andrews digital advert popped up on my social feeds. And it spoke about railway crossings removed and hospitals and plans to hire more nurses than I think exists across all of Australia, or some other magical figure. Very much a sort of an emphasis on the bricks and mortar, in a sense. There is not one iota of claims that he's making about his government's achievements in the social sense, in the social policy sense. What seems to me to be happening is that there's this veneer of, hey, look at this, there's all these magical things happening and all this building going on, and but I sort of don't look over there, don't look at what we're doing behind the scenes. And I find there's almost like a kind of blindness operating in Victoria, where the consequences, the impacts of lockdown, the realities of the policies that have been put in place by this government to divide kids from their parents, to divide parents between themselves, and to break apart communities. That's just flown under the radar somehow.
That's a good point. I mean, he does sell himself as an infrastructure premier when it comes to an election, but you're right. He's really known for his social changes, isn't he?
Well, I think we have the most radical, seriously radical left-wing government in Victoria and indeed in Australia's history. But again, that radicalism is sort of flying below the radar. And I think if he thought it was really good public policy that we should all be celebrating, he would be stating that writ large in the way he promotes his achievements, but he obviously doesn't. And what I find curious is that the complicity of the mainstream media in effectively hiding the consequences of the legislation he's bringing in mean that when you talk to regular folk about the implications or the realities of the legislation that's in, what's happening in our schools, what's happening in our hospitals, the usual reaction I get at first is, I don't believe you. That can't be true. And yet it is. Schools can now effectively, through the Doctors in Schools program, transition your child from one gender to another without your consent as a parent, and indeed without your knowledge. I find these things unthinkable. Is there any parent who, if they knew that was policy, would vote for that?
Well, Lee, you're a man of faith yourself, but do you recognise elements of faith in Dan's following? I mean, does his reverence have a kind of religious overtone to it?
I think, look, I'm not close to very many Dan fans, but there seems to be, with the whole sort of Teflon Dan concept, for some reason, all the things that we've experienced in Victoria, all the issues with IBAC and so on, I don't quite understand why this corruption, why this attack on the family, why this attack on religious freedoms, why this experimentation with wild gender and sexuality ideologies isn't sticking either to him or to his government. And it seems that the only explanation for that is you're right, it's almost like a religion of Dan.